Hello, everybody. Welcome to this workshop. It's amongst the last workshops of the School of Data Journalism. It's coming a bit towards an end, which is sad, but I think we had the opportunity to do lots of things in this edition of the School of Data Journalism. In this last workshop, we flew a kite, or we tried to fly a kite, and we were building an aerial map with the pictures, so people were working on the floor. It was pretty amazing vibe. So now we're going back to how to work with online tools. We're going to talk about scraping, and we have here Annabelle Church. You'll notice that maybe on your schedules you have Friedrich, who was supposed to come, but unfortunately he had to say no to the festival because he got a very, very exciting opportunity in South Africa. So, you know, South Africa beats Perugia, unfortunately. So Annabelle was really kind and offered to replace him. She's an amazing programmer, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot from her. I'll let her introduce it, and if you want them to download stuff, maybe give them a bit of a heads up. So just a quick word about the School of Data Journalism. It's organized by the Open Knowledge Foundation together with the European Journalism Center, and of course supported by the International Journalism Festival that hosts us all here in Perugia, and it's the 3rd edition. I am Milena from the Open Knowledge Foundation, and we have there Antoine from the European Journalism Center. We've put together this year's edition, and we're really, really happy to have you all here. And with this, I really pass the floor to Annabelle.
Right, I'm going to try this one standing up. Last time I sat down, it was a bit hard for me to see all of you guys. So, is there anyone who's going to actually follow along with their computer? Anyone? 2, 3 people? Okay. In that case, I'll probably get you guys to maybe download a nice little plugin for Chrome, and then you can follow on in the middle bit. And perhaps if you've got enough internet, you can follow along at the end as well. So, do you guys have Chrome or Firefox? Chrome? Chrome? Who would prefer Firefox? Okay. Okay, so if I said go download an add-on or a plugin for your browser, would you know how to do that? Who wouldn't know how to do that? So the plugin to download would be Clipboard to Table. You can do that in your own time, Clipboard to Table. But it's okay because we will cover it all about 3 or 4 times before we actually get there. Okay, so we'll start. So I'd just like to thank everyone for having me here, including the School of Data and the International Journalism Festival and all of these guys you can see up here on the slides. So thank you very much. I'm Annabelle Church. Oh, by the way, this is the hashtag here if you want to tweet about this awesome scraping workshop. So I used to work in The Guardian, which is a little old newspaper out in the UK, and now they're in Australia and America as well. I was a programmer there in their big digital department. And then last year I had the privilege of being one of these guys, one of 8 guys deployed throughout the world into other news organisations, building other tools for journalists. Tools and visualisations, news apps, and doing analysis. So broad, across the table help for journalists in newsrooms. We were in a lot of newsrooms in the US and Germany and Argentina. So, why do we need to scrape? Who here is actually familiar with the term scraping and doesn't need it explained? Who doesn't understand what scraping is? Okay. That's cool. So we might need to go back to the basics. So the internet is a large pool of data, and we go look at it when we browse websites. Maybe we look at IMDb, or we look at Twitter, or maybe we just look around at our Facebook feed. And all of this is like data that we can leverage. But it is in web pages, and it's not very useful outside of those particular formats. So if we want to do some analysis on people that are in our Twitter feed, or maybe we want to understand a little bit more about all of the movies in IMDb, we might want to grab that data and do something with it. It might be that we want to have government data or scientific data, and we go and grab that data and and we might then do some analysis with it. Unfortunately, unless you can find a big download button, you can't really always get the data that you want. So scraping is a way of liberating data out of HTML web pages, out of the web that we know and understand. So there are many different ways of getting data. You can phone someone and ask for it, and maybe they'll send you a CD in the mail. You can issue a Freedom of Information Act request if your country has that kind of thing, and maybe they'll send you a CSV file or a PDF. You can go to a website and copy and paste if you want. Find the big download button if they happen to have it. But we're going to mostly talk about how to get information out of websites when these things are not available to you. Okay. So there are some things around legality and licensing and being a compassionate coder or journalist that you might need to know before you start scraping. So firstly, if it's public information and you're taking it and using it for yourself, then that's probably okay. People are probably not going to get too angry about it. If it's private information and you borrow it off somebody's website, you might want to check the licensing agreement before you do that. And there are lots of different ways to scrape data. Some of them are more compassionate to the website owners than others. So always be aware that if you're taking large amounts of data off somebody's website, that you don't want to bring down their website in the process. Okay, so we understand that maybe the web, the internet, is just large pools and collections of data that we want to be able to use. And like, how do we find that? We can ask people. There's an interesting website called Get the Data or Quora, and you can go there and ask people, and people volunteer up either data sets or links to data sets or links to websites that might be able to help you. Now, don't worry if I'm going to talk with language that you don't understand or suggest tools that aren't listed up on the slides behind me, or if you can't follow along in all of the instructions, because there'll be a large cheat sheet at the end that you can have a link to, and all of this stuff will be in there. So all of the explanations, all of the definitions of the language, any tools that are useful. So don't panic. Okay, so Noah Veltman was an Open Use Fellow with me last year, and he said, an API is a key and a scraper is a crowbar. Who here knows what an API is? It's another way of getting data out of the internet. So Twitter has an API, and you can go and ask it for all of the tweets from a certain hashtag or search criteria, and you can use that information. So data comes out of the internet in different ways, and the API is a much more machine-readable, friendly version, and scraping is how we go about it if we don't have an API or a big download button. Okay, so now we need to scrape all of the things. So I'm going to show you a few of the things on the internet that have had scraped data in their making, or large data sets in their making, that might be kind of interesting for you to see, so that you can get an idea of like, what can you make if you have scraped all this data? Like, why would you want to? So this here is a nice little insert by The Guardian demonstrating Italian public spending. The platform is the open spending platform. And you can see here that there's large graphic here with a lot of like spending data for Italy. So they've used the open spending platform, which leverages large amounts of data, and they've like embedded this graphic here. So open spending is a platform which anybody can leverage and upload government data, and you get nice graphics and visualizations to try and help you understand what's going on in that. Okay, so ProPublica also did this thing called Dollars for Docs, which is an amazing data set. They had to scrape a lot of pharmaceutical websites and get release data from pharmaceutical companies about what pharmaceutical companies were paying doctors to do certain things. So if you are kind of interested, you could look for all the doctors in Miami and see how much money that are being paid by your individual pharmaceutical companies. So you can see here, University of Miami was paid by Pfizer some $13,000. Pretty cool. So they have all of this data. They scrape this data and had it released to them by certain pharmaceutical companies, so they could do this and release it to the public, into the public domain. Pretty cool. So I think this one is not loaded. We'll skip it. This was the organization that released some data. Okay. Another really cool one is by the LA Times around the earthquakes that occurred. So they needed to have a good understanding of what magnitude and where these earthquakes occurred, and they scraped this data off the Southern California earthquake center. So that was cool. I don't know if you can see here. It's pretty pale on my screen, but oh no, you can see it okay. That's cool. So we think about company data and government data, and there's also some other cool data sets the EU might want to look at. It's like science data. So what can we get out of NASA, for instance? The New York Times got a lot of data from NASA around the Mars rover, and you can see here that wherever the Mars rover went, we can show some nice pictures about its driving trajectory, which I think is pretty cool. I'm a bit of a science nerd, so I like that one. Some data comes in really large quantities, and you have to think carefully about how to visualize it. So this is wind data. And as you can see here, they didn't plot any one wind stream. They just did it for the entire country. And you can see the swirling nature of wind data. So all of this data is just sort of an example of cool things you can do with it. So why you might want it. So you want to grab it, analyze it, and visualize it. So how do we go about that? So let's start with something nice and simple. This is IMDb, which you all know, and we have some movie data here. And it's not very useful to me in this format. I might want to copy and paste it. Yeah. Man, copy and paste. I'm not sure how far copying and pasting will get me, but let's have a look at copying and pasting this into a spreadsheet and see what happens. So we can see here that I've copied some data, and it's all landed in one or two cells scrunched together. So we know that copying and pasting the internet is laborious and is not very useful for us. So we'll close that. So in order to understand how to get data out of the internet, you might have to understand a little bit about the internet. So I'm going to show you what the internet looks like under the hood, what this page looks like under the hood. So there's a set of tools that you can use depending on which browsers that you have. I've got Chrome running here, and the developer toolset for Chrome, if you right-click on any element, you can inspect that element on the page, and that's how you kind of understand what's going on. Just let me close this window up a little bit. Okay, so I clicked on the Adventures of Tintin to try and understand what this piece of data looks like. For me, it just looks blue here, but under the hood, it's a link. You can see that it's wrapped in things with nice angular brackets. So this is HTML, hypertext markup language. All it does is it describes the data on the page. It tells us what that data is, or what its semantic meaning is. So in this case, it's a link. You can tell there's a little A here. That just means it's a link on the page. You can see here that this data is wrapped in all of these divs, which is not a table, and we want to perhaps have this in a spreadsheet to do some work with it. Yeah, okay. Just give me 1 second. So I might back up a bit and talk to you about how you might find data first. So we've all heard of this thing, right? Google. There's a few nice things about it, that advanced search features that you might need to know. I, for instance, can ask the School of Data, which is a website that I'm familiar with now, if they have any PDF files. And they have 2. So Google can tell me whether a website contains certain file types. You might want to be searching for like a PDF, which is a document type, or a CSV. You might want to try and look for data directly. So if you can't find the big download button and you want to try and find a CSV file, which is a format that you can use and open up in Excel, you might want to look for downloadable data CSV. So if I'm looking for Italian data, maybe Italian crime data. Maybe I can find CSV files. Or maybe just crime. And we have a few CSV files here. Okay, so you can search by file type. You can search by site, a specific site, to see whether they have that content. And once you've found that content, we can grab that content for you. So I have some films here that I really want to get out. So let me open up a spreadsheet. So I might try with a Wikipedia example first. So I create a spreadsheet. And I'm sure that on Wikipedia I can get Italian cities. Maybe I want to match it up with another data set that gives me all of that information. So I have all of these cities. If I inspect this now, I think I'm pretty confident that it will be a kind of table format, and you can see here that there's this table tag here. So this is pretty interesting to us. So if I go to my spreadsheet and I import HTML, which is a method that Google Spreadsheet has available to us, if I tab complete or just type in import HTML equals import HTML into any cell, you'll get a kind of suggestion of how to complete that method. So it says import HTML and then any URL that you want that has some table data in it, inside quotes, don't forget the quotes, and that you're searching for a table, because we've actually had a wee look at the web page already, and there's this table tag here. So that's the thing that we're looking for. So if I put in my link where I know the table is, and I describe the tag that I'm looking for, which is table, and I want it to be the first one on the page, because I'm pretty sure that at least on this page, if I close this now, there's only one table here, and I want to get that table. So table number 1, close the curly bracket. And it's loading, it's thinking about it very hard. And I have all of the city data now for Italy, which I think is pretty cool and very easy. So you'll notice here that this is a live link to the Wikipedia page, which means that if someone changes the Wikipedia page, all the data in your table is going to change as well, which is really handy if you want continuously updating data, and really annoying if you're in the middle of playing with that data and someone changes it. So in order to make sure that you have a static set to analyze, you want to copy it into a new spreadsheet. And when you copy and paste it, you want to make sure that you're just pasting the values and not all of the underlying formula that you might have inside that other spreadsheet. So you can see here that if I go back to the very first spreadsheet, the one where we had the formula is here. If I delete the formula, all the data goes away, and there's no formula here. And if I delete it, the data remains. So it's a way, so if you're working with data, just make sure that you record all of the steps that you're doing. You make sure that you have a copy of the original data that you're working with in case something goes wrong and you need to have it back. So we have all of the cities in Italy. And so this is just using, so this is the easiest way of getting a table of data out of the internet. That's using Google Spreadsheets and this method called import HTML. So there are other ways of getting tables out of a web page. So there are Chrome and Firefox plugins. And I'm going to show you how to add that to your browser, even if you are familiar with it. So, you want to search for it. Clipboard to table. So this is the Mozilla one. I'm going to use Chrome, so this particular add-on is not for me. But if I want to add a plugin to Firefox, the methodology is the same. So the one for Chrome is called Table Capture. So when you want to add it to your browser, you just click on the add button. Mine's already added, so I won't go through that process. So if I open up Firefox and go to this list of cities, this Italian list of cities that we had, and find the table that's snuck down the page because my browser is too thin. Okay. So I want to get this information out of the page. And once I have my plugin installed in my browser, I should just be able to right-click on the selected data. So if you've got a really large table, you're going to have to select the whole thing. But I'm just going to select a proportion of that table so that we don't have to watch me scrolling down the page. And you can actually, in this one, you can select the whole table. It's smart enough. And we copy it. And I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet and see if I can insert it in here. Hopefully the pasting works. Okay, so I've selected and copied the table in my plugin, and I've pasted it into my spreadsheet. So we're in the same place as we were before with the import HTML method. We have successfully gained ourselves a table. You can do that in both Chrome and Firefox. I'm sure that there are other plugins for other browsers. Okay, so I want to go back to the really much more complicated page that I was looking at before that doesn't have a table so that I can show you how to deal with that. Okay, so we're back at IMDb. And we know it's not a table because when we look at it, we can't see any table tag in here under the hood, which is unfortunate because otherwise we could have just used the scraper table plugin. For this, we need another tool called Scraper. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the tweeting that's going on in the background. So this is the tool. Sorry, I've lost my place. She's opening it in the wrong browser. So you can download any scraper tools that you want that are plugins. And I should already have it installed, actually. So. Okay. So just like when I right-clicked and grabbed the table for our last plugin, Scraper allows us to grab all things on the page that are similar. So I'm going to select the information that I'm most interested in. So like for movies, I think maybe just the name of it and the year rather than the entire page. And we get this dialog box, which can be quite confusing. So don't panic. I'm going to explain all of the little elements. So firstly, on the left-hand side here, you have the description of where on the page all this data came from. And on the right-hand side, you've got this kind of mass of stuff. So I'm interested in the title of this movie, which is inside some of these elements called divs and sits inside an A tag down here. So if I add a new element looking for A, let's see if I can get that up. Okay, just 1 second here. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to go and work with the example that I had earlier. Sorry. Okay, so if I want to grab everybody who attends my, so I co-run Hacks and Hackers in Berlin. I want to see who is members of my Hacks and Hackers group. So I want to scrape all of that data. So just just as before, you'll notice that there are some of these odd element tags in here. So I'm going to describe this path here, the one that you can see up here. There's nested tags on the page, and in every tag we can describe the path to that tag with this thing called XPath. So you can see here that there's a div, which is a kind of anonymous tag, and inside that there's another div, and a UL, and an LI. And that means like there's random tag, unordered list, list item. And we are interested in the list items. I'm just going to make sure that it is the same. So in here, I have my name, which is, because I'm the first on the list for some reason. The name of this tag is an H4, which is just a title tag, nested very deeply inside this web page. And we don't really care where in the page it is. So I'm going to do 2 slashes to say anything from here on in that's shaped like an H4 tag, and suddenly I have all of the names that are on that page, which I think is very cool. If I call it what it is, that'll be even better. And I might want to add another column in here to give some context. So I think it might be interesting to know when everybody joined. And if you look in the web page, underneath the H4 for the name, and a bit further down, there's lists of stuff in here. So if I inspect the date specifically, it's in an unordered list, and it's inside this span here. So don't be too confused about HTML as a whole. It's just a bunch of nested tags. And you can select on anything that you want. And if you right-click and inspect anything in the page, you should be able to sort of see how it fits inside that web page. So you can go and have a little bit of a look around. So I know that it's targeted inside a UL, and it's a span. And if I look for the span, I think it probably won't be able to target it. We're getting another span on the web page, the one a little bit further up. If I explain to you the path now. Sorry, I might put it on a text document a bit bigger so that everybody can read this. One div inside another div. The number 2 just means that I want to have the second option of that inside a UL and down into that span that we're looking at. So you can see here it's covered in a span. And I'm getting all of these dates. So I can take out of a web page anything that I want, as long as I can kind of decipher the path right down to that element that I'm interested in. And I can export it straight to Google Docs, which I'm going to do now. And because I didn't name my column, it just guessed for me with the path. So I have tables in singular web pages. I have random markup in singular web pages. So these things all work when the page that you're looking at is very simple. But you'll notice down here there's pagination, which makes things a little bit more complicated. Does everyone follow along so far? Okay. So the data that we might want to scrape, data that we might want to scrape. It might look like this, the Library of Congress. It might look like this. It might look like housing data or IMDb data. And once we found it, things like this, a bunch of Congress data for the US. You might want to look for all small businesses or items that have the word small business in them. And you can see here that if the internet works, you'll get back a number of results, pages and pages of results. No, I don't want to give feedback. 49,000. You might be interested to know that if you find a website that has search capacity on the information and data that you want, if you put in star and search, you might be able to get back all of the data that is in there. And in this case, it's a little bit more than the 49,000 results that we saw before. So we know that there's a huge amount of data in here that we could leverage. Just as there is a huge amount of data in this housing site here. But how do we deal with multi-page scraping exercises when we have been so used to just dealing with one page or one table? There's a lovely tool here called Import.io. I might get my power cable. So I'll explain a little bit about Import.io. It's a tool that you can download and then install locally. It allows you to scrape different kinds of data and then upload them and export them as CSV files or into spreadsheets. Is there a power outlet here? Okay. So as an example, back to movies, because I watch a lot of movies. Nothing. And you can see here that there is pages and pages of data, and I clearly can't, selecting a table of data with your plugin or using import HTML in Google Spreadsheet, get all of those pages. But Import.io allows you to do this kind of automatic scraping really easily. So for now, let's have a look here. To get this going, I need to copy this URL. I need to browse to it. Import.io behaves a little bit like a web browser. It has nice, helpful prompts the whole way through, so you probably won't get lost if you try this along the way. If anyone wants to have a go, I can slow down. You need to download the installer. So there are three types of things that you can do with Import.io. And the kind of thing that we're going to do is a crawler. And what a crawler is it allows us to scrape more than one page at a for any one data set. So if your data set is pages and pages of things that all look the same, you can use a crawler to just scrape all of the pages where you've prescribed what that data format looks like in the beginning. So your first page has to look like your second page, etc. And you describe what that information looks like, and then you can ask it to scrape everything that looks like that for all of the pages that exist until it runs out of pages. So it's going to highlight all the elements on the page. We're going to select that we want an extractor because we want to scrape more than one page at a time. So in order to work with a tool like this, you kind of have to understand that it doesn't know anything about what you're doing, and you have to tell it everything. You basically have to train it like a small child. You have to say what a thing looks like, the first kind of thing that you're interested in. And I'm interested in this this table cell here. Well, probably isn't a table cell, it's probably a div in the background. It has this kind of contextual information about my movie and the star rating, and I want to grab every one of those items for every movie that is on this listing, and there's 311 pages. We won't scrape 311 pages because I think my phone might give out with the internet. but we will train it and see how far we can get. So I've trained one row. In order to train a child, though, you have to tell it more than once. So I'm going to add another row. Actually, I don't want to add a column. Select and train. Select the highest level element of the thing that you're interested in by hovering over the edges. Unfortunately, it's probably not very clear. So it is selected, and you train it, it changes colour. I think 2 is probably enough. I've trained it to look for 2 things that look kind of the same. Now we want to have an idea of the output data. So we know that for every movie, we might want to know the name of it and the date and maybe the director. And those are the columns that we want in our spreadsheet. So we add a column. And I think it's going to be called movie name. Yeah. And for that data, I think that this is the movie name here, and I'm going to train it. And I think I might train another one. And I think training 3 or 4 or 5 things is probably a good idea. Yeah. It's not going to allow me to train more columns because I've only trained 2 rows, so that's okay. I'm going to add another column for the date. And I would like to select it without the curly brackets because that's not data that's interesting to me. Sorry. Scroll up and select the date. And another column for the director. So for everything that we trained, the name and the date, I had to train it more than once for it to understand what's going on. But for the director, I just trained it for the director once and it highlighted the other director. So that's pretty good. Let's see if it can understand the entire page now. I think I need to train more rows. 1 second. So 3rd time's a charm. I trained 3 rows and now it recognises the whole page. So I have 21 rows on this page, and then they're all selected now. Actually, the data has... yeah. I have made a beautiful, beautiful mistake. 1 second. The trials of scraping. Let's try this again. So what should happen is you should have an entire page of beautifully selected rows. Okay. live demos. Beautiful. We will delete the page that is broken and add another page. Okay, I'm just going to quickly select that third row again. Oh, I see. So you can see here that what I've done is I've accidentally selected both the row above and the row below, which is why the data in here is messing up a little bit. So if I go back one step, I'm going to do my best at just selecting the right row this time. Okay, I'm not quite sure why I can't manage that. So let's start from the top. Okay. I'm going to officially can that one and try this again. Okay, so the lesson is please train more than 2 rows. Load. My apologies. So I'm going to be really careful about selecting the row at the right level of the element, because I think I was confusing it before. Come on, select. Okay, I have selected all of the rows now, so that's beautiful. I have 20 rows per page, and now I'm going to add those columns back. Grab the names of those movies. I'm going to train each column so that it highlights everything that I want without progressively going forward too fast. So when I'm training, I think it's, as we can see, probably really important to train enough for it to highlight everything. I eagerly raced through this earlier with you guys. Sorry about that. Okay. Just the date to go, I think. We'll grab a couple of these. Can see that they're selected all the way down the page now, and perhaps director as well. So there are many other ways of scraping as well. Once you're sort of familiar with how web pages are set up, much more complex scraping can be done with code, if that is your thing. So I have all of the rows and columns that I wanted to describe now. And you can see all of the data here, right down to row number 20 is all in the right columns and rows again. So that's really good. I have the selecting capability now. So as I said before with training, when you're training the columns, you need 3+, and maybe with the rows as well. When you're looking at the pages, you need more than 3 pages. So I'm going to show you how to do it. But rather than click through all 5 pages that you need, I'll show you what the results look like. So in order to add a new page, you have to navigate to it. So from your pagination, go to page 2. When you're there, tell import.io what you're doing. And it should bring up that page with all of the selected formatting for your columns and rows that you decided to have before. And once you've got it, you can click on and tell import.io that you have all that information. And you can do that for 5 or more pages. Please do it for 5 or more pages, otherwise you'll end up in the tricky demo situation that I was just in. So once you've imported 5 pages, there are clearly more than 5 pages of data here, you can tell import.io to upload that, and your data set looks like this. For me, I just collected 10 pages because I thought that my phone might give out under the sheer weight of uploading all of that data. And you can see that it's quite a lot. I can download it. You can download it as CSV or Excel, and then upload it into Google Docs if you want to play with that. So I have uploaded it already, and it's here. So everything that I described to import.io with a nice name, the name of the movie and the year and the director, comes back with the column heading that I prescribed. Import.io also has other information that might be useful to you when you're looking at the data, including the URL that the item was on in case you ever need to go back. And you can do data analysis with this. So you've got 3 kinds of tools now. You have import HTML for spreadsheets. You have 2 or more plugins for grabbing tables off single-page, simple websites. And you can use import.io to grab things that sit on more than 1 page. Sorry.
Does import.io also work on search results? So if I search a database and it gives me like 60 pages of search results, can I scrape them with or crawl them with import.io as well?
Yes, you can.
That's awesome.
For simple types of search. There are complex websites that are sort of data through obscurity, and the kind of technologies that are used to implement those websites just happen to make it difficult to get data out of with even things like import.io, and you might have to resort to using code. There are other There are other tools available for scraping, and we'll have a list of those up for you guys afterwards. Things like ScraperWiki and Morph.io. I don't know much about Morph.io, but I've heard nice things. So the tools and the data and the links to all of the websites are going to be up online. And just give me 1 second. Present. So now we know how to scrape all the things. That's nice, or nearly all of the things. Does anyone have any last questions before I say a few closing words? Yeah?
What about if I have to scrape a page or website which requires registration or payment for the data?
You're probably going to have to resort to using code, and not all sites can be scraped. And if you are having to pay for the data, then there's probably some legal restrictions around you actually using it in the ways that you want.
For scraping all the data I paid for?
Well, you would have to look at the legalities around that particular website. They will have restrictions on what you can probably use that data for. So if you have full ownership of it, I'm sure that you can, but you might have a restriction about releasing it to the public in any kind of format. So you might be able to do some analysis on that data, but you wouldn't be able to just maybe upload that data because you've paid for it, right? It's owned by somebody else.
And anyway,
Well, everything is dependent on the complexities of that particular website. So these are very simple tools, and they're there to get you started. Some complex things like signing in and payment, that is clearly perhaps beyond the capacity of import.io. So, anyone else? Hi.
do you know some tools to scrape tweets or, for example, particular hashtags on Twitter?
Yep, so you can, if you've got a selected number of tweets, you can probably use something that scrapes the website, but there are other tools that you can use to leverage their search API. So you can, you would need to get a developer key and maybe understand how JSON looks, and you can use your query to bring back something that looks like JSON. And using the search API, you can bring back lots of data, anything you want. Anyone else? Sorry?
You said with import.io I can scrape until 5 pages.
No, you can scrape as many pages as you want, but when you're training import.io, it needs to have enough data so that it understands what you're talking about. So when you look at information on a singular page, you have to tell it what are all of the items that I'm looking for, and then you want to tell it all of the pieces of data that you're interested in. So that's sort of 3 or 4 trainings to get that information. And when you're talking about multiple pages, you need to tell it what 5 pages look like so that it can analyze the URL and the structure so that it knows how to look for more information. So it needs 5 pages to understand what you're talking about, but it can scrape as many pages as you want. There's a little drop down, and yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, you can go first. Sorry.
Okay. For Twitter, you said the API and
Yep.
and the query and so on. But for Facebook, do you know if there are some API or something to find into the platform informations?
Yeah, so Facebook does have an API, just like Twitter, that you can use. Now, of course, these APIs have restrictions. So an API is just a way of a website to formulate and format data in a machine-readable way that you can access with code or an application. So Facebook and Twitter have APIs. Other things have APIs, like large news organizations like The Guardian have an API, and so does the New York Times. So it's just another format. Scraping is specifically getting data out of web pages, though, where you can't download a CSV or have an API available to you. Scraping is used to leverage HTML. So, does anyone have any? You had a question.
Yes. What can I do if I have an ASPX file and the data is locked in a container?
So,
for example, I'm working on a project to figure out film details that ran in certain festivals, but all the data relating to a certain title is locked in a container, and I've been trying to break up the container to sort by countries of origin, but I've tried several times, but I can't get there.
Okay. So there are definitely ways of getting at content in certain file formats. And if you have any questions about how to do that, there are websites like Stack Overflow that you can ask questions to, and people with like the technical skill can give you those kinds of answers. If you want, I can come give you some pointers after the question and answer session, but it's not directly related to scraping. File formats are just what you can get out. Sorry, I'm playing with my computer. You have a question as well?
Thanks. What if I have to scrape a website that forced me to open a box for getting the details of each element of each result of my research?
Open a box like having a form to fill in, or
no, a form with the already filled with the details, and I have to scrape each element, and they are not together in.
So groups of things that are not the same.
Yes. No, they are the same. The type of the data is the same, but it's not in the same page.
Okay.
So each row is in a different web page.
Okay. I think that for more complex problems, like problems where you have to get elements from different pages, or you're having to fill out a form in order to have results display, or you're having any kind of login process, you're probably going to have to resort to writing things in something like Python. So probably a bit beyond the scope of these simple tools. But if you want some more advice, I'm happy to come and have a look. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so I wanted to say two more things before we wrapped up. One is that next week in Brussels is an event called Data Harvest about EU data and journalists and computer programmers who are interested in data in and around the EU. So if you're interested in heading to an event like that, it's next week and it's in Brussels, and it's quite a lot of fun. And the other thing is, if you are really interested in scraping and you want to know a little bit more, there are meetup groups that rally around this kind of intersection between technology and journalism. I co-run one out in Berlin, and it's called Hacks and Hackers. Hack being terminology for an old-fashioned piece of terminology for a journalist, and a hacker is a computer programmer. So if you want to know more about scraping or visualizations, or how the influx of technology impacts your journalism life, then go to your local Hacks and Hackers group and hang out with them, and they'll be able to give you more information. And if you don't have one, make one. Yeah? Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions that they want to ask me specifically about a problem that they're actually facing, just come find me now or find me on Twitter.